right, Aztec fans, what is going on? John Schaefer with you. This is a, I guess, special edition, kind of transfer portal edition of the wrap-up show on this Monday night. Portal is open. We knew about Nick Boyd on Friday, and today we learn about Magoon Gwath. So here to talk everyone through it, and we can react together, and we can discuss where obviously San Diego State goes from here. So again, with you here on the wrap-up show, if you are new to the channel, please subscribe. You're on content for Aztec fans. If you wouldn't mind smashing the like button for me, you can follow me on X as well at John Schaefer, JONSCHAEFFER. So obviously by now, if you're here, whether it's live or on replay, you're aware that Magoon Gwath has entered the transfer portal. And I think if most people are being honest with themselves, they knew this was a distinct possibility, right? I mean, you're talking about a player that completely emerged in his lone season playing on the Mesa, whether it was defensively, offensively, Mountain West Freshman of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year. This was always obviously a possibility based on, you know, the situation that the coaching staff put him in and based on his play as well over the last 12 months. So, you know, to be completely honest, my reaction to it was not at all of surprise. That doesn't mean that it makes it any easier from a fan perspective, because you wrap your arms around these players, right? And you see them in Aztec red and black, and you hope that the era that we've previously been in, where you see players for 3, 4, 5, 6 years, is going to continue. But that's not the world that we're living in, obviously, right now. So, and that's not just at San Diego State, as we all know. And you look at the transfer portal today, I mean, it's insanity is what it is. But it has nothing to do really with the individual players and has everything to do with the system that's in place right now. But we're not going to be able to change the system. So it's one of those things that obviously San Diego State, like other programs, is going to have to deal with now and potentially moving forward. The rules will change. They always do. They have. You know, Brian Dutcher's been in coaching since the 1980s. And guess what? Things have changed since the 1980s. There's always been a separation, you know, whether you like to think there has been or not. You know, there was no NIL or transfer portal in 1999 when Steve Fisher and Brian Dutcher got here, and they hadn't won. I'm talking about San Diego State men's basketball for 20 years. And then obviously they built it the right way. And they got it to the point that it's been in where, you know, the Aztecs have been in the NCAA tournament 6 consecutive years and 7 of 8 years under Dutch. You know about all the success under Steve Fisher. But this is not some end of an era because Magoon Gwath is in the transfer portal. So let's be clear there. Let's start there, right? This isn't the death of San Diego State men's basketball. It's just not. Are things changing and evolving right in front of our eyes? Yeah, absolutely. But that's playing out on like a global scale in men's basketball and really in college athletics and playing out at the FBS football level as well. And listen, there's going to be a level of adaptation that obviously occurs. Like you got to adapt as things change. But, you know, for all the sky is falling, and I've seen a lot of it, for all that sky is falling mentality that's out there and all the anger and the frustration, and some of it I completely understand. I really do. And I'll get your comments, by the way. I'm just going on this initial soliloquy off the top of the show. I have none of this planned. Just talking off the cuff. None of this is planned. But for all of that, woe is me. I can't believe this. We're never going to be as good as we were previously. This is the end of the program. I can't support college athletics. For all of that, that is a complete overreaction. And, you know, I can say that right now, and I feel confident in saying that. And I'll look back on this 12 months from now, 24 months from now, 36 months from now, and I think I'll be vindicated in saying that. The sport has always had challenges. There's always been separations between quote unquote power and non-power. And that's going to continue. But, you know, you go back 25 years, it's not like, you know, San Diego State was landing the same type of recruit that Kentucky was landing 25 years ago. And that's still the case now, 25 years later. It's just changing and it's different and it's evolving. And just because Magoon Gwath is going to either turn pro or end up in the portal doesn't mean that San Diego State can't be successful in 2025-26. I mean, they lost their top 7 scorers from last year. If you include Reese Waters, I think I have that right. I think their top 7 scorers didn't play this year, and they made the NCAA tournament this year. And a year ago, when the transfer portal was already Obviously a big part of the sport. San Diego State made the Sweet 16. Shooting 2023, Miami spent millions on their roster, got to a Final Four. San Diego State also got to a Final Four that year, spending very little in NIL back in 2023. So I guess my point is that it's been a tough week. I get it, right? Obviously, you get into the NCAA tournament. Everyone wants to see the Aztecs play well. They lose to North Carolina. So we watched that play out. You heard what Nick Boyd had to say post-game, we'll be back. And then you read the news in the UT that he's expected to transfer. And then today, when the transfer portal officially opens, Magoon Gwath goes in the portal. Maybe he's testing NBA waters. Who knows if he even plays college basketball again, if he ends up playing professionally or if he's back in college next year. But I understand that. But with all of that being said, you kind of trust in this staff. I mean, haven't they proven it to you time and time again that they're capable of dealing with this type of adversity and they can deal with headwinds and they can come out on the other side successfully? I mean, I think we've seen that play out here, not just in recent years, but really in the history of the program under Steve Fisher and Brian Dutcher. So listen, I'm not here to tell you that I know I can predict the future and I have a crystal ball and I can tell you everything that all these players that are on this roster currently are thinking, because I don't. It's a whole new era. It's a completely different world, whatever cliche you want to use. You've got 800 plus players in the portal. I think on day one last year, you had something like 200 to 300. On day one this year, you have something like 800 or 900. I think last year there were something like 1,700 or 1,800 Division I players that entered that portal. The number this year could be 2,000 plus easily. I mean, you only have 360-ish Division I programs, and you're looking at something like 2,000 plus players in the portal. I mean, do the math on it. What's 2,000 divided by 300? That's over 6 players per team is what you're talking about. This isn't a San Diego State issue. It is an issue with the state of college basketball and really college athletics. So we're not going to fix, obviously, college athletics here tonight, but whether it's San Diego State, whether it's Gonzaga, I see players entering the portal today, former top 50 recruits, they're in the portal today from Gonzaga. I listened to a clip today on social media, I think from Rick Pitino, saying that he's at St. John's. I mean, they have resources, right? They were a 2 seed in the NCAA tournament. He's coached in 6 or 7 Final Fours, and he says he's not comfortable with where it is and where it's heading. And when he hears his coaches talk about, hey, this player might be available at UConn or this player might be available at UNC, and he thinks back in his career going back 10 or 20 years, he's like, is this really where we are and where is this heading? But again, Rick Pitino can't control that. I can't control it. Brian Dutcher can't control it either. And it's basically a situation where you make the most of what it is right now. And this is what I would say as well from a portal perspective, from an SDSU seat. San Diego State's always had success in the portal. I mean, whether it's pre-portal with transfers, whether it's in this NIL era. I mean, it's not that long ago that Jaden LeDee stayed for a second year. It's not that long ago that Reese Waters stayed for his second year. Hopefully he's remaining for a third year here on the Mesa. Miles Byrd could have gone anywhere after his sophomore year. He came back for his junior year. BJ Davis returned for a second season. Miles Heide returned for a second season. So this idea that everything's one and done, any player that's developed is going to leave, there's no chance of sustained success. I just think it's an overreaction to the immediate that's playing out right in front of our eyes. And I understand the frustration. Magoon Gwath is a tremendously talented player. There's no doubt about it, right? Nick Boyd put together a really good year. I think a lot of Aztec fans really wrapped their arms around Nick Boyd, right? He was a likable, really lovable figure for the Aztecs this past year, said the right things, played the right way. But guess what? Nick Boyd wasn't here a year ago, and San Diego State was in the Sweet 16, and he wasn't here 2 years ago when they were in a national championship game. So the coaching staff has proven time and time again they can find players, they can fit them well into the system, and they can develop players as well. So, there have been players that have left. There have been players that have come in, right? And yes, there have been players that have obviously departed the program. But with that being said, they brought in some pretty talented players over the years as well. And I don't need to fully run through them, but even here in the portal era, I mean, they've added impact pieces that have helped them get to the NCAA tournament and truthfully win in the NCAA tournament in 2023 and 2024. So that's my starting point. That's my soliloquy. You know, not with the hope of fully convincing everyone how to feel. You can feel how you want to feel. Like Aztec fans are passionate. It's a great trait. And I'm glad that they're as passionate as they are, because it gives me something to talk about each and every day on San Diego Sports 760 on John and Jim. And I get so much interaction with Aztec football and basketball and pre-games and post-games and calling games. So, I mean, the passion is a great thing. And the frustration is understood. Like, I get it, right? I completely get it. Like, I'm passionate like you're passionate about it. Would I prefer to see a player like Magoon Gwath spend his entire career in an SDSU uniform? Yeah, of course. Like, did I like seeing the career arc of Lamont Butler for 4 years and Nathan Mensah and Agwuka Rope and Adam Seiko? Yeah, you better believe I did. But with all that being said, as things change, you got to change with them. Adapt or die is the mentality, right? And I think Brian Dutcher and his staff are capable of adapting to the current landscape. I really do. It doesn't mean it's easy. I don't think it's easy, truthfully, for like Kansas. I don't know how easy it's going to be for St. John's. I don't think it's easy for anyone. Obviously, there's some that have the better chance to succeed based on like their lot. But like, look at this past year. I think 3 of the top 5 spending teams in NIL and men's basketball did not make the NCAA tournament. Let me say it again. 3 of the top 5 spending teams in NIL in men's basketball did not make the NCAA tournament. Indiana would be in there. I think Washington spent $2 million on Great Osipor. They didn't even make the Big Ten tournament, let alone the NCAA tournament. Obviously, Rutgers spent a good amount in NIL. They had 2 of the top 5 prep prospects in the country. They might have 2 of the top 5 draft picks in the June draft. They didn't make, I don't even know if they made the Big Ten tournament. They may have made the Big Ten tournament. They certainly didn't make the NCAA tournament, but you get the point. Like, it's not as simplistic as much as we want to simplify it to money, and money matters and ultimately probably is the most important factor in this. If you read Mark Ziegler today on Magoon Gwath putting his name in the portal and saw some of the quotes from Brian Dutcher, I think Dutch said that he believes Gwath in this current landscape could command $1.5 to $1.7 million. San Diego State obviously is not going to be able to compete with that. I don't know how many programs in the Power 5 or Power 4 are going to be able to truly make a competitive offer for a player like Magoon Gwath, but programs out there exist, right? The SEC has 14 teams in the NCAA tournament. The Big Ten, had a plethora of teams. Look at the Big 12. They still have 4 teams, I think, right now in the Sweet 16. So teams are out there that exist, but even in the power structure, there are haves and have-nots. And even outside of the quote-unquote power structure, I still think there's programs that are better equipped to deal with the headwinds than others. And I would say San Diego State ultimately will be better equipped to deal with it. And we don't know how this all shakes out in the weeks ahead, right? This portal opened today. It'll be open for the next 29 or 30 days. Then it'll close and we'll have more clarity. And players could enter late. We saw Elijah Saunders go in late last year. I think Lamont went in relatively late last year. So we won't fully know until we know. And we can't fully forecast because we're in this world where you have unlimited spending and you have unlimited free agency. So how can you project anything when that's the climate that you're working within? So it's hard for us to even forecast, obviously, what this roster is going to look like. Like, I can't come on here and definitively say, when Pharaoh Compton and Taj DeGorville and BJ Davis and Miles Heide and Bird and Waters and Thok Majak and Tay Simmons, like when that's your core, here's how you're going to build around that core. Because I don't know. Because I don't know if anyone knows who's going to stay and who's going to go, not just here, but elsewhere. But if you allow yourself to take a deep breath, relax, and take a step back for a moment and say, listen, despite some of these changes, despite Boyd going in, despite obviously Magoon going in, if the Aztecs, and if you read Mark, if you've seen some of the quotes from Brian Dutcher, it sounds as if they've had promising conversations with a good portion of this roster. Again, you cross your fingers and you wait to see how this plays out. If you can retain, and again, I say if you can retain a good portion of some of the names I just mentioned, maybe not even everyone, but if, again, your starting point includes a Reese Waters and hopefully includes a Miles Bird and some of these younger players that have been in this program for 1 or 2 years, that is a team that has a chance to not just be good in the Mountain West, but get back to the NCAA tournament. They would be retaining more in that scenario than they retained this past year and then ultimately got to the NCAA tournament. And here's the other thing about the state of NIL. Yes, obviously, Is San Diego State going to be competing with Kentucky or Kansas in dollars? No, but they weren't competing with recruits typically over the last 25 years with Kentucky or Kansas either. But the collective, and by the way, Mesa's doing the matching campaign, as you guys know, and I pinned a link at the top of the chat if you want to get involved, because that's a good way to make a difference. But like Mesa's raised real money. Now, maybe it's not to give everyone $1.5 million. That's not realistic. But, there's going to be an amount within that collective that's going to afford them the opportunity to hopefully retain a good portion of this roster and then add to this roster as well. And when you think about the additions they've made in recent history, they've made some really savvy additions that have allowed them to win at a high level. And I know some of it was before the portal, but I'm talking about recent history. I know Malachi Flynn's had a year. I know Jaden Ledie's had a year. I know you might be saying, well, today they couldn't land Malachi Flynn because the money would be too extreme, or today they couldn't land Jaden Ledie. Okay, well, within the last 2 or 3 years, they've landed Micah Parrish. And within the last year, they added Nick Boyd. So, and Nick Boyd, by the way, when he came here initially for his 1 year, I believe turned down more money to play here than he could have received elsewhere, including in Power 4 leagues, where I think he had an offer at Louisville, for example, and he had other offers as well. So San Diego State is going to speak for itself. It's not going to have all the advantages that programs like Louisville and Kentucky are going to have. But I put this on a message board earlier tonight because I'm looking at all this reaction and all this woe is me. We'll never be able to compete at the big boy table ever again. I'm like, this is such an overreaction. Again, my opinion. You may disagree with it, but I'm like, this is such an overreaction because I just don't think that's going to be the case. I really don't. So we'll see how it all plays out. The offseason is just getting started. They just played a game a week ago today. No, we could go tomorrow, right? They just played a game 6 days ago. So this is just playing out right now. But again, I think the resume for Brian Dutcher, I don't need to tell you what it is. He's coached in 4 national championship games as a head coach and an assistant coach. He'll figure it out. He's been the head coach here 8 years. He's gotten to the NCAA tournament with his staff 7 times. He's averaged 25 wins a year. I think they got under control. Have things changed? Yeah. Will they adapt to it? Yes. Are they facing more headwinds today than they did in 2023? Yeah. They overcame the adversity of going 30-2 and having a team not even be able to play in the NCAA tournament in 2020. They've got top 5 most wins in Division I basketball this decade. So, I'm going to lean into that, and I'm going to trust in that more than say, well, Magoon Gwath is out. There goes the program. I just don't think it's as simplistic or easy as that. So anyway, as you make your way in, subscribe. Year-round content for Aztec fans. I talk basketball, football, realignment, whatever's on my mind, and obviously transfer portal as well. Smash the like button for me if you wouldn't mind. You can follow me on X at John Schaefer. If you want to contribute with the super, I appreciate it. You don't have to. I'd rather probably have you just give the money to Mesa by clicking the link pinned at the top of the chat. But if you want to contribute with the super, I'll get to those. You don't have to do it. I can scroll through the comments as well and try to get to some of them over the next, let's say, 45 minutes or so. I did see this one from Kevin Wilson, who is a loyal viewer and Aztec fan, and with us here tonight on the wrap-up show. So thank you, Kevin, for the super chat. It is appreciated. He says, Aztec fans have more pause after finishing 4th and being bounced on Thursday in the Mountain West Conference tournament. Feels like a step back losing 2 starters. Well, yeah, it's clearly not a step forward. In an ideal world, obviously, you're retaining as much as you possibly can. And that's an important part of it. Continuity, experience, retaining, right? That's something the Aztecs didn't necessarily have with this team, yet still navigated their way to the NCAA tournament. And again, each program is unique to itself. And I don't want to compare San Diego State to Kentucky because it's just not comparison. But I'll give you the example, and they had unlimited NIL resources, obviously. But Kentucky returned no points from their team last year, obviously spent millions on their roster, but brought in an entirely new roster, and right now is still playing, right, in the Sweet 16. So obviously that's an extreme where you could replace everyone. Look at Utah State, because that's obviously different because they were dealing with obviously budgets. But even 2 years ago under Danny Sprinkle, where they returned no one, they added pieces, a lot of them where Sprinkle had previously been. I think Montana State, right, where he added Asabor, also added the point guard, he returned no scoring from that Utah State team from 3 years ago, and brought that team to the NCAA tournament. They won a game and they got to the round of 32. My point is, there's like multiple ways to go about this. And yeah, I think ideally, from Dutch's perspective and the staff's perspective, you probably want to start by retaining as much as you can, because they've done a really good job at development. And I do think that there is a correlation between retaining and success in the next season, right? Like continuity, like you have a higher jumping off point to begin your season. With all that being said, it's not the only way, obviously, to win, right? You can win with 4 and 5 year system guys in your program, and they've done that a lot over the years. But even before the portal, they were adding in important pieces via transfer to sit out a year to supplement their roster. And even some of the best players here under Steve Fisher and Brian Dutcher didn't spend 4 years here, right? You know that, obviously. Kawhi Leonard, yeah, he went to the NBA and spent 2 seasons here. I go back to like a Jalen McDaniels who redshirts and then spent, was it 1 season or 2 seasons in an Aztec uniform? And there's other examples that you guys could put in the chat, and you're more aware of probably than I am in covering the Aztecs. For me, primarily over the last 9 years. For some of you guys, you've been covering this and following this for the last 25 years. And for some of you, it's been longer than that, since before Fish and Dutch. But my point is, they've done it multiple ways, even here on the Mesa, Steve Fisher and Brian Dutcher. And they'll continue to do it in multiple ways, and they'll continue to reinvent, and they'll put themselves in a position to be successful. And again, not to get ahead of ourselves, because I don't think it's fair to do in this wide open era that we're in. But there's a world with the NIL resources that they're going to have with Mesa, and with the roster that hopefully they're able to retain to a large extent, where San Diego State is going to be picked among the top 1, 2, or 3 teams in the Mountain West heading into 2025-26, even without Magoon Gwath and even without Nick Boyd. Like if you return Waters and Bird as your starting points, along with some of these other players, that we've talked about, the Davises, the Heidis, this freshman class, Tay Simmons coming in, who's got very high upside that they're very high on. I mean, you got a chance to potentially be among the favorites in the Mountain West like they typically are. They have a chance to once again be among the favorites. And shoot, this year they were picked to finish 4th in the Mountain West. I know they ended up finishing 4th, but I mean, preseason 4th in their own conference, and they got to the NCAA tournament. And again, lost Reese Waters before the season, lost Magoon Gwath in the season. I think if you're being truthful and honest, you'd probably take that if you would have known all of the adversity they would have had to deal with throughout the course of the year. So again, that's, my 2 cents on the situation. And I'm sure some people agree with me. I'm sure others disagree with me. I go back to what I think Dutch said Friday when I read about Nick Boyd departing, and I was surprised by it. Like, listen, I've been a huge fan of Nick Boyd, having covered him as closely as I've been able to do, fortunately, in talking with him post games and having him on John and Jim. I just thought he was a prototypical Aztec. I thought he went about it the right way. Dealt with an injury in the offseason, didn't get healthy until a couple of weeks before the season. I thought he did everything he possibly could to put San Diego State in a position to win at a high level. And I just don't fault the players. I really don't. Like, if you put yourself in their shoes, now I don't know, maybe Nick Boyd didn't say all the right things. Like, maybe he shouldn't have, said at the end of that press conference, we'll be back. He came on with me on John and Jim. I listened back to some of it. I played some of it back on the radio today. And he basically implied that he would be back in 25-26. And maybe with the benefit of hindsight, he wouldn't have done that. But put that to the side for a moment. And you're really going to cast blame at the players. Like, the players didn't create the system. And here we are, or here I am in the middle of my career. And like, we've all been tempted to make decisions based on the finances of it. You got to put food on the table. You might have a spouse. You may have children. If someone provides you with an opportunity to double or triple your salary, I mean, how many people are going to jump at that? More than not are going to jump at that. And we're talking about young people, right, that have a chance to make life-changing money. Like, I'm never going to earn $1 million in a year. And I don't know how many opportunities Magoon Gwath is going to have to earn $1 million a year. Nobody can predict the future, his health, how he develops, his ceiling. Like, if you've got a chance to go earn at that level, support your family, your loved ones, who am I to be critical of that? Honestly, again, we didn't create this system. So if you're Nick Boyd and maybe your best chance to earn is your super senior season and you got a chance to earn more elsewhere than here, then I understand it. I mean, Nick Boyd entered through the portal and he's going to leave through the portal. What do they say? Like the portal taketh and the portal giveth, right? Like it's a commandment or something. So yes, SDSU, have they been hurt by the portal? Yeah, like most programs, they have. Have they also benefited from the portal? Yeah, they have. And they'll continue to benefit. Right now, we're only seeing a portion of the book. Like we're seeing an unwritten book. Shoot, we're not even seeing like a chapter of the book right now. We don't know who they add. And guess what? They will add. And they've had success adding. And I don't know who they're going to add. I'm not going to speculate on names. It's day one. I have no clue. I'm sure they're watching film as we're talking about this right now. There's hundreds of players in this portal across all levels, Division 1, 2, and 3, right? Across all leagues. Players that the Aztecs probably recruited out of high school or spoke with in the portal previously or are brand new to San Diego State that have to be vetted and talked to and potentially brought onto campus and have visits before any type of decisions are made. And they'll have multiple additions, obviously. They're going to have 4 or 5 additions at least to this team between now and the end of the spring, heading into the summer and heading into 25, 26. So, I mean, you see the names. I see some of these names. And there'll be some names that you're fully aware of. There'll be some names that you probably aren't. There'll be some players that were on San Diego State's radar previously. There'll be some players that we haven't yet heard of that potentially come into the fold as well. I thought the staff did a pretty damn good job this past offseason. Who disagrees with that? I mean, Boyd, McKinney, Jared Coleman-Jones, like they supplemented well. They supplemented well this past offseason, and they put their team in a position to get back to the NCAA tournament. And, that to me is pretty impressive. And I've said this before. I said throughout the course of January and February and March, if Brian Dutcher and his staff get this team to the NCAA tournament, considering the injury to Reese Waters and the youth, San Diego State was one of the youngest teams in the country fighting for an at-large spot all year long. They get in as one of the youngest teams also in the NCAA tournament. That, to me, is one of the best coaching jobs of Brian Dutcher's career. I get it. They didn't go to a national championship game or a Sweet 16, but when you consider the circumstances that they were dealing with, and that includes injury, not just the departures via the portal, and they had them. They had departures, no doubt, right? I mean, Saunders late, Butler, was, I think, somewhat late in the process. Like they had those departures. They graduated some terrific players. I mean, Jaden Ledee and Darion Trammell, all timers in the history of the program. And they put themselves in a position where they were able to get back to the NCAA tournament. Now, did it finish the way they wanted it to finish? Yeah, probably not, right? But they got into the NCAA tournament with one of the youngest rosters in the country that was fighting for that large spot all season long. And they had some really high moments, whether it was non-conference with Houston and Creighton or in conference with the Boise wins or the Nevada wins, New Mexico, Colorado State. It was a good year. Was it the best year in school history? No. But was it a good year? Yeah, I think getting to the NCAA tournament, and I'll stick by that for as long as I'm covering the Aztecs, I think getting to the NCAA tournament's a good year. I think from there, obviously, you want to win games in the tournament. They've proven they can, 7 of them in the last 3 years. Obviously, 7 over 2 years in 23 and 24. So anyway, I'm rambling. Let's see here. I'm just trying to see here. Looking for a comment to maybe jump off from. Like I see a lot of this, and I appreciate this comment. Thank you, Jeremy, for being here. Thank you for this comment that rolled in probably 20 or 30 minutes ago, but I'm just seeing now. So he says, it's so frustrating to have SDSU give Gwath the opportunity, time, training, healthcare, and coaching needed to succeed, and he just shoves the knife in their back to go grab a bag. So disappointing. Again, I don't think it's disappointing from the player's perspective. And I truly believe that when I hear that from the coaching staff and Brian Dutcher, like they understand the system that is in play right now. And it's very hard to be, to basically fault the players for this situation. But in terms of like San Diego State giving Gwath the opportunity, I mean, that's kind of how it works. I mean, I think the way San Diego State was able to get him was they offered him a year earlier than most programs. They redshirted him. Now he was hurt. And then obviously they got him on the floor and we saw what the ceiling was. And we saw obviously the potential and we saw it right in front of our eyes. And I think ultimately only played 25 or 26 games because he missed 6 games. But he did play 25 or 26 games. And I think at the end of the day, you look at the numbers don't tell the story, right? Because if you watch these games, the numbers do not tell the story of what Magoon Gwath meant, but also what his potential is. And that's why I said today on John and Jim, I think it's one thing to replace his actual production. Like, and this is with all due respect. I think the production can be replaced. I think the 8.5 points, the 5 rebounds, the 2+ blocks. I mean, he's a brilliant defensive player, one of the best defensive players in the country, shot alterer, shot blocker, right? And his offensive game was just improving, week in and week out when he was healthy. And he was a 3-level scorer, right? At the basket, mid-range game, 3-point shooter. I don't know what he shot from 3, but it was good, especially good for a 7-footer and especially good for a redshirt freshman. But my point in saying that is they will absolutely find a player to fill that void in terms of like how it shows up in the box score. Can they go find a center to jump into that spot and score 8 or 9 points and grab 5 or 6 rebounds and block a shot or 2? Yeah, the answer is yes. Now, but we don't know where Gwath is going with his game. And again, you'll never have his future potential obviously impact your team. So yeah, it's one thing to replace 8 and 5 and 2. It's another thing if Magoon next year is like 17, 10 and 3, right? Because you're not ever going to see his 17, 10 and 3 now that he's in the portal. Now, I don't know if anyone's going to see his 17, 10 and 3. I was at the Jam when he said a couple of weeks ago that his goal was to get to professional basketball. That was his goal. That's what he said, point blank, 2 or 3 weeks ago. He wanted to test NBA waters and play professionally. That's what his goal was. So, who knows if he returns to the college game. I think ultimately he probably does return to the college game for another year, probably to continue to develop and then probably raise his ceiling in stock from an NBA perspective. But then again, maybe he gets seen on the circuit and has a chance to get to the combine and has a chance to get to the NBA. And that's, all she wrote for Magoon Gwath in college. But that'll play out in the weeks ahead. I'm not wishing him at all any ill will. I think that you couldn't ask for more out of Magoon. I think he did everything that he was asked of, right? He got healthy a year ago. He developed in the system. The Aztecs were the beneficiary of his play this year, right? He played very well. He helped them win games. And from here, Magoon has a decision like the other 4,000 Division I players. But I'm not going to fault Magoon Gwath. Again, does the system itself need to change? Sure. I don't have the answers on it. Should there be a finder's fee if he goes elsewhere? I don't know. I don't know how you do it. I really don't. I don't know what the future looks like on the other side. I do not think this is a era that will exist in perpetuity. I do still think changes are coming to the landscape in some form or fashion. I don't know what they look like. I don't follow it as closely as probably others do. We're staring down the barrel of rev sharing in addition to NIL, and it's an evolving and changing landscape, and that's going to continue to be the case, certainly into 2025 and beyond. If I could solve it, I would try to, but unfortunately, that's way above my pay grade. Let's see here. Don says, even if San Diego State could pay Magoon $1 million, I wouldn't want them to. That's insane. Listen, I mean, wherever this is heading, like I said earlier, kind of like adapt or die. I mean, you kind of have to play the game, so to speak, right? Like if you want San Diego State to remain, I've heard Dutch say this so many times, like if you want them to remain nationally relevant, then obviously the collective is going to play a significant role. And again, they're never going to be paying the same amount as Kentucky or Carolina, right? And I think by and large, some of these players will stay here even for less. But when the gap gets so wide, and again, I go back to like what we all do for a living, when the gap is so significant, again, if you're making whatever you're making, $60,000 a year, $30 an hour, $80,000 a year, $35 an hour, and all of a sudden that 60K becomes 180, that's life-changing. Like for a lot of people, what's life-changing is to get a $5,000 or $10,000 raise when they make $60,000 or $70,000. Imagine having your salary tripled and how life-changing that is. So, at some point, I mean, the finances become the most important part of the equation. And I understand that because a lot of people are able to support their families. Not everyone comes from a situation where they don't need that, and that they can, they can turn it down to continue to develop and remain in the right system because they see the end game and they see that they could get paid off long term in professional basketball. But that doesn't, again, I don't think you can put all players in one box. I don't think everyone has the same motivations. I really don't. And I see a lot in some of the chatter like today is like, oh, sports ruined. All that matters is money. Every player is going to leave for the bag, so to speak. But it's not the case. It's not true. If you follow this closely, like I do, if you follow the portal, if you see the movement among players, not every player can be fit in that same box, so to speak. If it was solely about money for each and every player, I don't think Nick Boyd ever would have come here, and I don't think Reese Waters would be here right now, truthfully. And I don't know if Miles Bird would have returned last year. If it was solely, if the only factor was money, then I don't know if Jaden Ledee would have returned for a final year. If it was solely and only about money, I don't know if Lamont Butler would have returned for a fourth year if it was solely about money. So you have to be careful not to like paint all players with the same brush, because I think everyone's different. We all have different characteristics and qualities and things that matter to us. To some, maybe it's about the program and the culture and the coaching. For others, it's about the education. For others, it's about the money, right? Like, I think there's a lot of factors that need to be considered. Now, make no mistake, I think money's a big one, a big factor. And it might be the biggest factor for the largest percentage of players in Division I basketball. But even if it's the largest, factor for 70% of Division I basketball, what about the other 30% of players? So it's not like every player has the exact same motivation every single year of their college career. Let's see here. No, I really don't see it like this. I really don't. I saw some of this, play out as well here today. Like, why even put up with it, right? Does Brian Dutcher need to deal with this? Is this something that the staff needs to deal with? And like the comment here, wouldn't be surprised if Dutch entered the retirement portal. There's no way I deal with this. I mean, this is a business that has continually changed, guys. Continually. There have been so many eras and ebbs and flows, changes in the recruiting process. There's just been so much change. I mean, if you've read on the Fab Five, which I have, and then you fast forward to today, but not even today, go back to the 2000s and then the 2010s, and now the 2020s, there's been the one constant is change. That's the constant. That's the one constant in this sport. And Dutch has done it in a variety of ways. And I think he understands what San Diego State is up against, but it's not just what San Diego State is up against. I think it's just the landscape, like what coaches in this era are dealing with. And like he has said before, and you've heard him say this, you've probably heard him say it with me on the radio or post game or somewhere with the media, like, businesses have to adapt to regulation, right? The regulations change, policies change, laws change, businesses adapt. How much change has there been in the history of Microsoft over the last 50 years, or Apple, or IBM, or name the company? They've had to adapt with the times and make those necessary changes as regulations and laws and policy and reforms occur in front of our eyes. Same thing's happening right now in college athletics. So you have to be nimble. You have to be able to, it's all cliche, like stay on your feet and make the necessary change as it presents itself. And I think San Diego State's going to be able to do it. Like, it's got a lot working in its favor. It really does, from the recruiting area to the fan base, to the university, to Viejas Arena, to the winning, to the collective. I think there's a lot working in its advantage. Now, does it have every advantage? No, but I think very few do. I think if you asked, the head coach at Xavier, he'd tell you, I wish I was in Villanova's shoes within my league. I think if you asked Villanova, he'd say, man, I wish I had the football money that Ohio State had. I think if you asked Ohio State, they'd say, I wish I was the blue blood of North Carolina or Duke and had those resources available to me in men's basketball. I think if you ask Kentucky, they'd say, man, I wish my players weren't leaving for the NBA. I wish it wasn't solely transactional where I can offer a player $1.5 million, but Indiana is going to swoop in and offer $2.5 million. Maybe it's a bad example, but you get my point. Like there's this pecking order that's playing out everywhere that's impacting all levels of Division I basketball. I thought it was impacting one and dones well before the transfer portal. So I just feel as if this has always been playing out. There's always been this ebb and flow that comes with it. And it'll be interesting to see like where this program and this staff turns to make sure that they stay relevant and capable of not just getting to the NCAA tournament, but winning games in the NCAA tournament. They will have an answer. They will have an answer. Like this is the, I don't know how many of you guys are Padres fans, but like Mike Schilt has this line like winners find solutions, which I kind of like. And it's true. Like this isn't the time when the going gets tough, isn't the time to be like, throw in the hat. All good. It was a fun run. 2023 was great. It'll never happen again. Like that's not how they think. They're not sitting around in that office being like, man, we're never going to get to the NCAA tournament again now that Magoon Gwath left. I mean, Magoon Gwath played here for 1 year. Magoon Gwath wasn't on the 2023 national championship team, right? The team that got to a national championship game. Magoon Gwath was terrific. That's all terrific. Maybe would have given you a better opportunity to get to a national championship game if he stuck around, but it's not like the whole program is predicated on any one player. That's not accurate, right? They had great teams in 2011 and 2014 and 2020 and 2023, and there'll be another great team on the other side of this. And I'm sure that's how they feel. It's how I think a lot of people should feel. And I get the frustration in the immediacy of it all. It's challenging. It's frustrating. It doesn't feel quote unquote right, but what are you going to do about it? And what you're going to do about it is support the program because that's why you're here right now. That's my guess. That's my guess. Aztec Analytics, appreciate you, man. He says, thank you for being the voice of reason, John. Some of our fan base needs it badly. Listen, if you want to kick and scream and throw something today and get mad at someone, by all means, man, way better than the opposite. The opposite, if this program today lost someone of the caliber of Magoon Gwath and it was crickets on social media, that would be a problem. That would be way more of a problem than people reacting in the manner in which they've reacted today. Like I'd much prefer the reaction and the vitriol and the anger than no reaction at all. And I think San Diego State probably feels the same way. And what you do after all that is the sun's still going to rise in the east and set in the west. And Brian Dutcher and his staff are still going to put this team in a position to be successful next year. How are they going to do it? They'll figure that out in the coming days and weeks via the portal, via recruiting, via retention, right? That's going to all play out. That's all going to play out. And we're going to watch it play out in real time. This has become a 365-day-a-year sport, which I actually kind of enjoy. Now, I don't enjoy watching players leave for the portal, which again is not just happening here, but elsewhere. But truthfully, as someone that's a big college sports fan, and I know you might not like where college athletics is right now or where it's heading, and you might prefer the way it was in 1995 to 2025. But with all that being said, this is something you can cover all year long because this portal is going to play out over 30 days. Then players are going to choose their destinations. Summer conditioning has been lengthened. I mean, they're on the practice floor in July now in men's basketball. Obviously, football is basically a year-round sport with spring football, with the portal being open for multiple windows in football. So again, you may not love it, but if you like San Diego State athletics, you have a chance now to cover it basically or consume it. Maybe not 365 days a year, but closer to 365 days a year than ever previously. So there's also been this reaction today. Cinderella's dead. They killed the golden goose. You heard Stephen A. Smith, maybe some of you saying this will be the death of college basketball if they've killed Cinderella, right? Because you have the remaining 16 teams, none of them from a non-power league. Now, I think there's a lot of factors at play here. I mean, a lot. And I don't think we can overreact to one NCAA tournament and say just because St. Mary's didn't make a Sweet 16 or New Mexico or San Diego State or whomever, that means mid-major basketball is dead. Like, I think that's a complete overreach and overreaction. There have been other tournaments before where you've had 4 number 1 seeds in the Final Four. What I would say is this. There's a couple of factors contributing. Is NIL one of them and the portal? Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, it is among a series of factors. Is it a factor? We'd be lying if we said it wasn't a factor. Here's another factor. Some of these programs are now in the leagues have gotten larger. So the P4 was never as many programs as it is right now. Now it was a P5, I get it. But some of these programs that weren't at the quote unquote power level are now at the power level. BYU's in the Sweet 16. They weren't at the power level last year. They were in the WCC. Houston's at the power level. They weren't in the power level 2 years ago. They were in the AAC. So, a lot of these programs have changed leagues with their successes. San Diego State's going to be included in that. I mean, they're heading for the Pac-12, obviously a new iteration of the Pac-12. But Butler got to a Final Four out of like a Horizon League, but they ultimately end up in the Big East. So if they got to the Final Four now, you'd be like, oh, it's the death of mid-major basketball. Well, Butler within the last decade was a mid-major program, and BYU within the last 2 years was outside of the power structure. And Houston, you get the point. So I don't think this is accurate. I think that it's changing. I think the P4 structure is changing. There's more programs in it. I guarantee you, I can say this with definitively, that there will be upsets in the NCAA tournament moving forward, and there will be double-digit seeds making Sweet 16s. We have not seen the last of a double-digit seed in a Final Four, and there will be mid-majors advancing to Sweet 16s in the future. And 1 year does not make a trend. And I honestly feel that way. Now, do I think this has been the most compelling NCAA tournament? No. I don't think it's been great to watch. I don't think there's been a lot of Cinderellas to this point. I thought we saw a really good game last night with Colorado State and Maryland. Again, would we say mid-major basketball is done if Derek Queen missed that runner? What would we say then? Colorado State's the exception. I mean, what's different? You know what I mean? It's sports. It plays out. Sometimes the ball bounces your way. Other times it doesn't. But Colorado State didn't lose that game because of NIL and transfer portal and money. Maryland outspent Colorado State, but that's not why they won on the floor yesterday. They made a play. They made one more play than Colorado State. That's the reason why they're moving on. Let's see here. Now, and the other thing I would say, by the way, this idea that if you've killed Cinderella, you've killed the golden goose, right? And ultimately, you're killing this tournament. I don't think you are. I honestly don't think. I think from a television perspective, I think Cinderella works for a round or two. Yeah, St. Peter's, they made the round of 32, and they made the Elite Eight. Did CBS really want St. Peter's in the Final Four? Would you rather have St. Peter's in the Final Four or UNC? UNC was the team that beat St. Peter's, I think, that year in the Elite Eight. Turner and CBS are going to enjoy great ratings even without Cinderella. So, yeah, I do think part of March Madness is madness. You want to see good games, and you probably want to see some amount of upsets within there. But guess what? When Arkansas plays Kansas in the first round, it's the highest rated first round game ever. Because you have huge brands, and you got big-time coaches and big-time players and, relevant programs nationally. They're cool with that. If the Final Four is 4-1 seeds, CBS will sign up for that every day of the week. You need big brands for this event to work. I like to think you need a combination of both, but big brands are probably preferred, truthfully, by CBS and Turner than a Final Four that had SDSU, FAU, Miami, and UConn even back in 2023. And by the way, we're not that far removed from that Final Four in 2023 or Oakland beating Kentucky last year in the NCAA tournament, which, by the way, was in this NIL era as well. Yeah, listen, I don't know I'm not a fundraiser. But again, in going back to some of the, I see what people put on message boards, and I know the fundraising efforts that Mesa goes through to try to put this program in a situation where it can be successful, obviously now and moving forward. And whether it's the business community or individuals, all of it matters, is what I would say. So obviously collectives are impactful. Money is a part of this equation, if not the largest part of the equation. And the collective's playing a huge role in that. So whether it's alumni or local businesses or fans or community members or whatever it is, I mean, people need to put their heads together, come up with some grassroots campaigns. If you're an Aztec alum, if you're a fan, if you're with me right now, I mean, you're a hardcore. If you're with me on this Monday night at 10:30 Pacific, you're in it, right? You consume this. This means something to you. If it means something to you, then again, like Schulte says, winners find solutions. So I don't have all the solutions. If I had a way to raise $500,000 in the snap of a finger, I would help raise $500,000 in a snap of a finger. If I can assist, I'll assist. If you can assist, you'll assist. But whatever it is, telling people about the importance of the collective, coming up with grassroots ideas, whatever it is, it all matters, I guess, at the end of the day. I remember when I was 18 and my mom's like, you need to vote. I'm like, why? Millions of people have voted. Who cares? My vote's going to matter. I think some people feel that with NIL and the portal, especially when you're outside of the power structure, like you feel disenfranchised by it all. I say, what is my $20 going to do for Mesa? Is that really going to keep Magoon Gwath from leaving? Well, if a lot of people had that same thought process or are willing to give, then ultimately it does matter, right? When a lot of people do vote, you do have a voice. When a lot of people, do donate, make charitable contributions, it does have an impact. So again, I'm not telling anyone how to spend their money. But if you are disenfranchised by the process, understand that this process is playing out nationwide. It's part of college athletics right now. It's not just Brian Dutcher and San Diego State asking for resources to help them maintain their level of success. I hear it across the country. I've heard Mark Pope at Kentucky talk about the importance of their collectives since he's taken the job, and he's done it in huge forums on radio and television, trying to elicit support from Kentucky fans, Big Blue Nation. So it's a part of it. It's just a part of the job right now. And it's a part of college athletics now and likely moving forward as well. Let's see here. I want to touch on this, and thank you, EA Plays, for this. I probably have another 15 minutes or so, guys, as I just kind of run through some of the chat. And I'm going to miss a lot of it, so I apologize, but just trying to hit on some of them because it elicits something that I've been thinking about when I see some of these comments. So thank you. He says, an issue I have is that if Davis, Heidi, et cetera, become good, they'll leave. It's basically every year we gain upperclassmen and have a new team every year now. And it's a revolving door. I've seen and heard this from Aztec fans and others, maybe in the quote unquote outside the power structure, that say that what's happening is programs in the Mountain West or elsewhere are becoming, feeders for the Power Four, right? It's becoming AAA to the major leagues. And what I would say to that is A, I think it's too early to say something like that. And B, I actually don't think it's factually accurate, specifically with San Diego State. Now, have they lost players? Yeah, absolutely. But like this idea that if Davis and Heidi return and become good, well, first of all, they're already good. Like BJ Davis is a reason why the Aztecs beat like Houston to start this year, or beat Creighton. I was at that game against Creighton. I think he might have scored 18 points in that game. And Miles Heidi was a reason why down the stretch they could overcome not having Magoon Gwath. Like Miles Heidi gave them a chance in some of those games. I think they beat New Mexico without Magoon Gwath because Miles Heidi played terrific basketball. So it's not if they become good. They're already good, all right? These players are contributing right now as underclassmen. And by the way, under this hypothetical, if they return, that's their third year in the program. So when you start getting to that third year plus player, even programs like Kentucky and Tennessee are not going to have a lot of players that are staying in their program for more than 3 years. So I think we're at a point where you kind of cross your fingers and say, if we get 3+ years out of a player, we got a lot from that player, right? We've developed them. They've helped us. We've helped them. They've helped us to be successful and vice versa. So I'm not going to freak out if a player in their 5th season of eligibility that's got a San Diego State degree like Lamont Butler leaves. Like, the guy's an Aztec for life. He's got a degree from San Diego State. He poured his heart and soul into this program. I remember he broke his wrist, I remember, as a sophomore. He hit that shot in Houston. He dealt with personal family tragedy while at San Diego State, by the way. So, like, I think it's pretty unfair to criticize people that have done it the right way. They've played by the rules. They've done it within the structure of the system. Lamont played here for 4 years. You really think he had to play all 5 years here? Keyshawn Johnson's got a San Diego State degree. He spent 4 years here. He was on a national championship team. He should be celebrated for that, right? He shouldn't be chastised or vilified because he had an opportunity to earn for his family. That's how I see it. And that's how I'm going to see it moving forward. Now, would I prefer to have players for 3+ years as opposed to 1 year? Yeah. But I think if you really look at it, if you take the step back and do a deeper dive here on how it's played out with San Diego State specifically, like Keyshawn Johnson, 4 years, Lamont Butler, 4 years, Micah Parrish, multiple years, Jaden Ledee, 3 years, including a red shirt. Miles Byrd has been here 3 years. Reese Waters, if he returns next year, 3 years. Heidi and Davis, 2-year hypothetical if they return, 3 years. They're not all rotating door players. It's not all, quote unquote, feeder system or AAA to the big leagues because they're returning. Now, again, I can't say that about all players, but I'm also not doing the deep dive on Ohio State's roster and seeing how many of their players are returning when able for a 3rd or 4th year, or Penn State, or the University of Washington, and so on and so forth. You understand the point. So yes, while it may be true, San Diego State has some players that have left after 1 or 2 years. Is the same occurring at Michigan State and Michigan and NC State and Wake Forest? And if the answer is yes, then it's more systemic/systematic than it is specific to San Diego State, if that makes sense. And I don't know if it does, but I'm trying to make it make sense. Like Kevin says, and Kevin had the super chat earlier tonight, and Kevin's a loyal Aztec fan, like most of you here are, and a big time supporter of my work. He says, winning year to year is great, but what made Aztec basketball great was watching the development of kids over 3 or 4 years with program buy-in. And I get that. I understand that. You might say that's what made college basketball great at one point. And I go back to like this one and done era where, I think we're probably fans of like the Kentucky Wildcats in the 60s, 70s, and 80s that preferred to have their players for 3, 4, 5 years. And then they had the Coach Cal era and everyone was one and done. So like, I get it, right? Like, I do understand that. I think the point is a valid one. I'm just telling you that sometimes things change, right? Like, we can't control the direction of college athletics. And I don't think we're just going to turn our backs because you used to get all these players for 4 years and now maybe you just get them for 2 or 3. So you're not going to be a fan anymore because a player left after 3 years. I think that's overly simplifying it probably. Let's see here. And I get it. This is not the first person that's had that type of comment. I understand it. I see it more often today than I saw it a year ago today. And I see it more often, a year ago today than I saw it 2 years ago today. So I do get that. Yeah. And this is kind of my point also, Don, and thank you, that like they adapted before the portal and NIL and they'll adapt post portal and NIL. How? I don't know. Because that's the job that they're tasked with doing. And I trust that they'll do it based on their absurd track record, which is basically now 4 decades when you talk about Steve Fisher and Brian Dutcher at Division I, Yeah, you heard me. I'm not asking anyone. You do what you want to do. But I get it. I'm also not going to get on the phone and call Qualcomm and be like, you need to donate X amount of dollars to Mesa or else. Like, I can't tell anyone to do anything. It's on each individual person, corporation, business, donor to do whatever they're able to do. I mean, that's not my job. Obviously that's not my job, but I mean, it's my opinion. So you may disagree with it, but I may disagree with you. Let's see here. No, see, I disagree with this too, Jeremy. So, like this idea, stop recruiting high school players until this, system kind of resolves itself. Okay, but I would tell you that like Taj DeGorville, Pharaoh Compton, Magoon Gwath played critical roles on San Diego State getting to the NCAA tournament, and you don't get there without those players. So no matter what happens on the other side, that point remains that point. Like Pharaoh Compton is one of the highest ranked Aztec recruits of the last 20 years. And he came here in the NIL portal era. So I don't know what narrative that kind of debunks, but Pharaoh Compton could have taken more money. I think his final 5 included Tennessee. They were a 2 seed, Iowa in the Big Ten. I forget whom else, but I mean, he had huge offers across the P4 and chose San Diego State. Okay, I understand the point if you're saying every high school player that comes here leaves after 1 year, therefore I need to recalibrate my thought process with recruiting. But is that the case? Because BJ Davis is a promising prospect. He came here out of high school. Miles Heide is a promising prospect. He came here out of high school. Miles Bird is a promising prospect. He came here out of high school. So I don't see the reason to transition from recruiting high school players, especially if college basketball is heading more and more down the pipeline of money in the portal era with third, fourth, and fifth year players. If players are getting paid, then I actually would lean more into the high school prep route than I would be leaning into the fourth and fifth year player route. Like, as opposed to, dole out $400,000, $600,000, $800,000 for these third, fourth, fifth year players. What about develop a prep player and keep them around for even 2 years, and not have to spend the $500,000 or $600,000 or whatever it would cost? Again, that's for the staff to worry about and to figure out. But I wouldn't just completely eliminate high school recruiting because Magoon Gwath left after 2 years. Like, that's just me personally, because I think there's going to be different scenarios that play out for different players now and moving forward. Let's see. Yeah, and they've been really good at evaluating talent. You're right. And some of it will be under the radar. I mean, they're not just going to, let's say, CBS Sports publishes the top 10 players in the portal. San Diego State's not solely going to be going after those players. It'll be hard to go after those players. Players that are getting $1 or $2 million are not the players that San Diego State's going to be seeking in the portal. But they're going to find pieces that can help, like a Nick Boyd from this past year, or like a Wayne McKinney III, and so on and so forth. I don't know where we are there. I think it's a good question on the Pac-12 expansion and TV deal. I think it's sooner rather than later. I really do. I think we're getting close. I don't know the exact timing on it, but I think we're probably within weeks, truthfully. So I think it's sooner rather than later. Let's see here. Some people were asking me about, like, Nick Boyd and, did he mislead, or, was he untruthful in saying that he was going to be back for a second year? And what about his uncle? I think his uncle was a former Division I head coach at Rutgers and a longtime assistant. I think an assistant at Seton Hall. I think his uncle played a big role in him ultimately choosing San Diego State. Again, I'm not going to be critical of the players here. I'm just not, because I don't think it's fair. I don't think it solves the problem to be critical of the players. I appreciate Boyd for what he did in an Aztec uniform this past year. Would I've liked to see him for another year? Yes, absolutely. But, like most players, not that they're replaceable, but can San Diego State find a suitable replacement to fill that void? Well, they did last year when they brought Boyd in. So I trust that they'll be able to do it again as well here in 2025-26. Let's see here. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of the same comments, a lot of frustration, which I understand. I do. Yeah. Try to see here. Thank you. I mean, thank you. So I was saying earlier, like, Indiana spent all this money. They didn't make the tournament. Kansas State spent so much money. They had to be a top 5 spender. They didn't make the tournament. Washington, under Sprinkle, spent so much money. And again, I'm not saying that the money doesn't help. I actually think there's a sweet spot with it. I think you don't want to have none, right? You don't want to be in a situation where you can't do anything with your collective. And as good as it might sound to have the $8, $10, $12 million collective, you also have to be aware of, like, the agent and player motivations, right? So I feel like there's a sweet spot in there where you have the resources necessary to put together a roster that can win and be retained, right? But you don't have to be the embarrassment of riches, because the embarrassment of riches doesn't always work, whether it's professional or college sports. Now, would you prefer to have more money than not? Yeah. But I'm telling you right now, Kansas State was coming off like an Elite 8 within the last 2 years. They add pieces, and they were under 500. Again, Indiana was around the bubble all season long, despite spending probably 6, 8, 10 times more than San Diego State. Washington probably spent 5 times more, at least, than San Diego State in NIL, probably more than that. And they're on the outside looking in. So I'm just saying it's not the end-all, be-all. And by the way, all those programs lost players as well in the portal. Kansas State, Indiana, Washington, they did not all retain their entire roster over the last 2 years and just add to it, A couple more minutes here, and then I got to go. Let's see here. Just scrolling through. Yeah, and I will talk to. I'm glad you mentioned this, Darren. Thank you. So Brian Dutcher will join me tomorrow at 4 p.m. San Diego Sports 760. John and Jim. You can watch on YouTube. You can listen on the iHeartRadio app, or you can just listen on the radio on 760. I haven't read this, but he just reminded me that Dutch will be joining me tomorrow. We'll talk about state of the roster, Magoon, Nick Boyd, the collective, the portal, the past year, expectations for the offseason, whatever. I mean, we'll talk about everything. If you've got a question for Dutch, you can put it in the chat and I can get to it tomorrow. But he says tomorrow when you interview Dutch, is there a world in which you could ask him what each player roughly gets or what his free agent budget is now without Boyd? And I think he probably says or Goon. I don't know if they're going to get into particulars with dollars, truthfully, because I just don't think that's probably a worthwhile game to play. And they probably don't want it out there publicly because it's something that probably plays out behind the scenes because there are agents now involved and it's such a transactional process that's playing out. But we're going to get into all of it because, Dutch is very truthful and honest with this stuff. And I think he wants, Aztec fans to be aware of the current situation and how they can assist and what they should be aware of and where the program is heading now and in the future. So, I mean, we'll get into all of it. I don't think we're going to find out that Miles Bird made X in 2025 and is set to make Y in 2026. But yeah, we're going to get into all of it tomorrow at 4 p.m. And yeah, I mean, it's even with all this change with NIL and portal, it's continuing to change because now there's going to be rev share moving forward. Larger rosters, I think, as well are coming to men's basketball. How does that impact San Diego State, other programs moving forward? Again, it's all a moving target that's going to play out. And do I understand the disappointment with the news out of Magoon Gwath? Absolutely. Absolutely. I think we all, were disappointed in that. I think if you're being realistic, you knew it was a possibility considering what we saw from him over the last year. Was it disappointing what played out with Nick Boyd on Friday? Yeah, of course it was. But let's wait to see how the process plays out. Let's not judge the entire book without reading it because they're going to add players in the portal as well. We'll see what the rest of this roster does between now and the portal closing in 30 days because portal season is here and we'll see what it looks like for San Diego State on the other side. So again, join tomorrow, San Diego Sports 760, John and Jim at 4 p.m. Brian Dutcher will join us then and we'll get into all the particulars of the portal and Boyd and Gwath and what happens next for San Diego State. So please join, please subscribe, year-on content for Aztec fans. Smash the like button for me. Follow me on X at John Schaefer. And until tomorrow and until the next time on the wrap-up show, appreciate you guys hanging out. And this has been the wrap-up show. Thanks, guys. Have a good night.